The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hey Hoopheads! Wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market, and they truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads Podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Also, make sure to check out the new Dr. Dish Home Machine, which is perfect for these crazy times when gyms and schools are closed. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is TK Griffith, boys head varsity basketball coach at Archbishop Hope High School, and you're listening to the Hoop Heads Podcast.
Hey Hoopheads, we all hate ankle sprains, and they happen way too often. Ankle injuries are the #1 sports-related injury. Arise is trying to change that. With the iFast, your athletes get preventative protection and full mobility. Athletes no longer need to wear bulky braces that limit performance and give mediocre protection. Anyone playing sports should be using these products. Keep your athletes in the game. Don't wait for them to get hurt to take action. Visit www.arise.com, spelled A-R-Y-S-E, and use the code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off the future of performance. That's ARYSE.com with promo code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off.
One tweet that we put out might take an hour or two for us to put together the clip. Like, we want it to be always very valuable information that we pass on to coaches.
Slappin Glass is curated by the duo of former Chapman University basketball teammates Patrick Carney and Dan Krikorian. With the aim to produce the highest quality basketball and coaching content from sources all around the world, the duo combined the knowledge and experience of Patrick's 14 years of professional playing and coaching experience in Germany, along with Dan's 13 years as a coach at the high school and collegiate levels. Both basketball junkies, Pat and Dan started Slappin Glass in May of 2020 and launched the Slappin Glass Podcast in August of 2020, hosting guests in deep dive X&O conversations. We have a huge announcement coming on Wednesday, November 11th, when we will be launching our Hoopheads Mentorship Program for coaches. We're excited to continue making an impact on the coaching profession, one coach at a time. Follow the Hoopheads Mentorship launch on Twitter @HoopheadsPod. Make sure you check out our other basketball podcasts on the Hoopheads Pod Network, including Thrive with Trevor Huffman, Beyond the Ball, the CoachMaze.com podcast, Players Court, Bleachers and Boards, plus our team-focused NBA pods, Cavaliers Central, Grizz and Grind, Nuck If You Buck, the 305 Culture, Blazing the Path, and our newest edition, #Lakers. We're looking for more NBA podcasters interested in hosting their own show centered on a particular team. Shoot an email to info@hoopheadspod.com if you're interested in learning more and bringing your talent to our network. Be ready to take some notes as you listen to this episode with Patrick Carney and Dan Krikorian from Slappin Glass. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here without my co-host Jason Sunkel today, but I am pleased to be joined by Patrick Carney and Dan Krikorian from Slappin Glass. Guys, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on, get a chance to talk to you about some of the exciting things that you guys are building with Slappin Glass, and we'll get into that as we go through the episode. But wanted to start out by kind of going back in time to when you were kids. And Patrick, why don't you go ahead and start? Tell us a little bit about how you got into the game when you were younger.
Yeah, for sure. I got into the game, pretty much through my dad. He had played in college. He played at the University of Pacific. And, just growing up, he would always play with his buddies. They'd play, once during the week and once on the weekend. And so those were always kind of like highlights for me, going with him either on the weekends getting donuts and then watching him play basketball, or playing in the evening and then getting pizza afterwards. So that's kind of where I grew up and kind of fell in love with the game, seeing my dad play, and then eventually, as I grew and developed, getting able to play with them and, playing pickup, and from there it took off.
What part of the games you like the most, besides obviously just watching your dad and spending time with him?
I mean, what I always liked was the competition, for sure. Always kind of drew me. I mean, seeing them play, everyone was friends, but it's always fun when you can beat your buddies and get to talk a little smack. So like the camaraderie always kind of drew me as well. And and then another thing that maybe isn't related, but you could always play basketball by yourself, as far as just shooting. You just needed a ball and a hoop, and so it was accessible 24/7.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things when you talk to a lot of people who have played multiple sports when they're younger. I think people that tend to go towards basketball, it's kind of that two-faceted thing that you just talked about, where there's such a team element to the game, but that there's also the ability to go out and just practice on your own, as opposed to you think about being a football player or baseball player. You need somebody to throw you the ball, or you need somebody to go up against. Basketball, you can spend, as we all know, hours and hours and hours just by yourself working and improving. And I think there's something to be said for that when you think back on the childhood of a lot of people who have stayed in the game as players or coaches, whatever. A lot of people have that similar story to you, that they loved the team aspect, but then they also loved the ability that they could go out and improve at the game when they were by themselves as well.
Exactly. That's what I always loved. There was never any barriers to it. Like if I wanted to get better, it was just on me to go out and do it, and not, like you said, I needed 10 other guys to play a baseball game, or someone to catch the ball for me.
Absolutely. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, so similar to Pat, where growing up, my dad actually did not play basketball in high school. My dad played football in college and whatnot. And so, but as a kid, I played basically every sport you could, football, soccer, baseball, basketball, all of that. But I always just found myself coming back to basketball, and it was something that I always wanted to practice. And we got a hoop out in my front yard, and like Pat mentioned too, it was just so great to go out there with the ball and spend 2 hours just shooting by yourself. And then, if the neighborhood kids came over, that was fun too, to play and lower the hoop to 6 feet and dunk it and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
But, I remember really kind of getting into the game around second or third grade. My grandpa coached an NJB team of mine, and I remember just that whole experience was great, and I started to really fall in love with the game around that time, and then it just kind of grew from there.
All right, so you guys both end up playing some high school basketball and then eventually get to be teammates in college. So talk a little bit about, maybe each one of you share a favorite memory that you have from your time as a high school basketball player. I think it's always fascinating to go back and hear what different people remember about their high school career. So I don't know which one of you wants to go first.
Yeah, Pat, I can.
First lesson. All right, go ahead, Dan.
Sure, I can take this. Well, gosh, favorite high school memory. We're starting to reach back here now, but gosh, it's like most things, coaching now too. The guys always remember the trips, that we would do, overnight trips on tournaments or whatnot, and you're hanging out in the hotel room with your buddies and things like that. I think the things I remember though from like being on the court or playing are, we had a huge crosstown rivalry. Pat's probably smiling over in Germany because he knows the crosstown rivalry that my high school, Costa Mesa, had against Estancia. Two schools in a smaller town, and you would pack the gym, and everybody you felt like from the city was there. And so those games every year, one at our place, one at their place, were always just really memorable and a lot of fun. And ones I still go back to if I can, now that I'm older, just because it's a fun community event.
Did you have a winning record in those games?
We did. Happy to say we did.
Patrick, how about you?
Yes, similar to Dan. Every time you're playing your rival, it's always a memorable game, fun game, like Dan said, just because the gyms are so packed. But yeah, we had it was an away game, and against our rival, and we were actually down for sure double digits in the first half, and just in the second half, like whatever happened just clicked and like everything went our way. We turned the game around and got a huge upset victory on the road. And I mean, that's what makes the game so special when you have moments like that where just like everything goes right and your 6th, 7th, 8th man, they're all coming in, they're all contributing. And like it was such a great team victory and a team camaraderie, and just the bus rides back was just incredible. So that kind of always jumps out at me as I look back at kind of my high school career.
All right, so as you guys are going through your high school career, are you thinking about college basketball right from the very beginning as your young kids, or is that something that you get into your junior and senior year, you start to think that maybe it's going to become a reality? Just talk a little bit about the recruiting process, the decision to make your college decision about where you're going to go play, and then how you guys end up meeting and just what it all, how it came together at Chapman.
Go ahead, Pat. You can take that one.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I think, I started just playing only basketball in like 5th, 6th grade. And I mean, I really kind of fell in love with it and knew I always wanted to continue to play past high school. So, starting my freshman year, I mean, like any kid, it's like I'm going to go Division I or, just some pipe dream. But I always knew I was going to play because I just love the game too much. The thought of me just stopping after 4 years of high school was never like going to be an option. So as going into my senior year, I believe, I wasn't too active. I mean, as far as pursuing any, off-season club teams or anything, mainly just through summer league with my high school team. I got a couple offers, but it was mainly Chapman that stood out. I mean, as far as just how active they were in pursuing me, especially the assistant coach was very active and always calling me, and, they just kept the regular communication. So for me, it turned into really a no-brainer because, I talked to some other clubs, but just the interest was so strong from Chapman, and I knew I could come in and play right away. And that's all I really wanted to do was just play right away. So that's kind of how I ended up at Chapman.
So how many games during that season when you were a senior, how many games, when you say interest, how many of your high school games were they at? Were they there all the time?
I would not say all the time. That's a very good question that I really couldn't. I mean, I think maybe 5 games would be my guess. Chapman and my high school were very local, so I'm sure they were at several of the tournaments we were at. It wasn't very hard to, meet me or see me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I playing college basketball was always a dream of mine. I would go with my grandparents and parents to local, junior college or college games when I was younger. And so it was always something I was, really wanting to do. I did play 4 sports in high school, so I was unsure. I always knew basketball was where I wanted to end up, but I was always sort of unsure exactly with the college sport route, which one I would end up landing on. But basketball, by the time I got to my senior year, I was able to, be at a place where looking at a few different schools to go and play at. And kind of like how Pat mentioned, Chapman, first of all, is a great academic school. And so offered, a great academic environment that I was looking for. And then I had a chance to, stay closer to home a little bit, which I liked. And then also a chance to get on the floor. So that was kind of my path in getting to Chapman.
All right. So as a multi-sport athlete, let me ask you this at this point. As a multi-sport athlete, we all know that unfortunately there's a trend in all youth sports, not just youth basketball, but that kids seem to kind of be forced into this club scene where adults in particular are forcing them or encouraging them strongly to, come and specialize in one sport. And oftentimes parents who don't have experience with raising a kid in the youth sports environment, I don't know if fall for it is the right word, but kind of get roped into that particular thing. So what would you say to a kid who's, let's say, 9, 10 years old and is thinking about, hey, I got to drop all my other sports because I just want to be a baseball player, I just want to be a basketball player? How would you encourage a parent or a player at that age to just continue to be on the multi-sport path instead of specializing?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Coming from playing, all different sports growing up, I think it's always helped me as I've gotten to, higher levels and understanding how different sports work. Like, as I know, we'll get into this later with Slappin Glass and kind of where I coach at now at the collegiate level. I study a lot of football. I study a lot of offensive coordinators and how they use stuff and how it relates to basketball. And I think that sports, relate to each other. But to your point about, younger kids, I do think that, kids specialize probably too early, and I think there's been like some scientific evidence too of potential injuries down the road if you're using the same muscles over and over all the time. And I think that playing different sports, especially when you're younger and figuring out what you love or don't love, and I think it's really healthy, and I think it makes you for a better overall athlete. I know when we recruit guys to Chapman, I always like when a guy plays another sport. Not that it's a make or break thing at all, but sometimes a guy is a pitcher or quarterback or something, and it's always interesting having a rounder athlete. But at the same time, when you get to the high school level and you're someone like Pat who just wanted to play basketball, I think at that point too, it makes sense to start narrowing down as well, especially when you're looking for the next level.
Pat, what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think at a young age, it's important to play all these sports, and like Dan said, just learn your biomechanics, learn how to catch different balls, how to make different movements, stimulate all your muscle groups. But especially too, I think for the mind, and like Dan said, I mean, I know there's been books and some studies like to play different games with different constraints and problem solving, like is also good for an athlete as they develop and then begin to specialize. Like just having these different problem solving skills and being able to process different different stimuli or different game situations. It's important that you have a broad experience and not just specialize so early, because then I think you become too narrow-minded and less creative.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that one of the things that you see too is that as our youth sports landscape has changed, where kids aren't just playing maybe the pickup sports that we all played when we were younger, where you were playing backyard football or you were playing baseball in the sandlot or you're playing pickup basketball, which we know isn't nearly as prevalent today as it was back in the day. And so as a result of that, I think you end up with maybe a situation where a kid only played one formal high school sport, but they might have played a lot of sports growing up from the time they were 7 years old until they're 13 or 14, just out in the neighborhood with their friends. And I think there's something to be said for that being missing. And I think it makes it a challenge. I think it makes a challenge for developing that competitiveness. And as you guys have talked about, just the spatial awareness of an athlete and being able to use different muscle groups. And so it'll be interesting. I think when we look forward, let's say another 15 or 20 years, and to see how these things evolve, just to see what, again, the impact is in terms of injury and in terms of the development of players and kids and as people. I just think because it's such a different scenario than it was 15 or 20 years ago in terms of how kids are growing up. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out ultimately in the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so college basketball. Talk to me a little bit about the adjustment going from high school to college and what your experiences were like at Chapman as college athletes.
Well,
want me to start on this one, Dan?
No, I'll take it, Pat, because I know you'll be too modest with your career. So I'm going to say before Pat was an outstanding college basketball player and had a phenomenal career. And so, Pat and I played together. I would say for my career, I was like probably the best 6th, 7th man in college. I was that role, the shooter off the bench. I started a little bit here and there, but I started my coaching career early in college because I was able to see a lot from the bench and see a lot how Pat played, how the game worked. And so
these are such lies right now.
Here we go.
But I mean, college was amazing. I mean, transitioning to it, I was lucky to get on the floor as a freshman with Pat and have a good career. And just the strength and the size and the speed of the next level was an adjustment, and one that now as a coach you try to help guys through. But Pat and I, we had 4 great years playing together. We played on 4 really great teams. I think we almost won 20 games every year at Chapman. But you could talk much more with Pat about his career because it was much more extensive than mine at the college level.
All right, Pat, take it away.
I mean, first of all, it was my honor to share the court with Dan, so don't listen to what he says.
I like it.
But no, I mean, definitely what sticks out, I mean, coming from high school even to the Division III level is, the physicality of the game. I mean, you're just now playing against men, 20, 21-year-olds, and it's a much physical game, a little bit faster, and especially defensively becomes much more demanding than compared to your high school defense. So that really jumped out at me. But, obviously once you go through your growing pains and as your body naturally develops and you just pick up the speed of the game, like from there, I had a great 4 years. Dan said we had some really talented teams and had really successful seasons. And more so too, my biggest takeaway too is just, obviously me and Dan have remained real good friends, but just the camaraderie and the guys I met and the experiences I had more so off the court is what really stood out to me as when I look back on my 4 years there at Chapman.
Yeah, I think it's such an intense experience that you look back on it, you're like, man, we went through a lot together, especially with somebody who came in your same class and that you spent 4 years with. I think there's no doubt that those bonds are ones that remain strong just because of everything that you have to go through and fight through and work together to achieve. That bond with teammates is one that's really, really strong as you look forward and as you look back on your career. So tell us a little bit about what you guys thought you were going to be doing, what you thought you were going to do for a career when you guys were finished. So Dan, were you always thinking that coaching was in your future? Was that something that you were always looking for? And then Patrick, you can kind of give us an idea. I know you had an opportunity to play professionally for a number of years. So just kind of give us an idea of where your head was at in terms of careers when you guys were going through school.
Yeah. So I always felt like, coaching was a place I wanted to go. I didn't go into it right away. I was a business major at Chapman. I went and worked for a mutual fund company. I got a really, great, 8 to 5 well-paying job right out of college. And I thought that was the path I should go and what I should do with my business degree. And after about 2 weeks, I realized this wasn't what I wanted to do. But I stuck it out for about a year and a half and, went through that whole thing. It was really good for me to do, to have that kind of a job. But at the same time, and I won't spend too much time on this, but when I was getting ready to leave the mutual fund company, I'm also a musician. And so I was getting ready to put out another album and I was going to tour for about 2 months. And so I left the mutual fund company. I went on tour all over the Western United States. And then when I got back, I needed a way to make some more extra money. And so I hit up a buddy of mine who was the head coach at my alma mater at Costa Mesa about coming back and helping out with basketball once I was back from the tour. And he said, well, instead of helping out, why don't you be the JV coach? And so I jumped at it to have the chance to become the JV coach. And so that's how I got into coaching, came back from the tour, jumped in, was the JV coach for a couple years before eventually I moved up to be the varsity head coach and then eventually came back to Chapman. But that's how I got into it.
All right, so what do you remember about that first team that you stood in front of as the JV coach, trying to figure it out for the first time on the coaching side and not being a player?
Yeah, it's quite a difference for sure. But, I keep all the old practice notes from those times, and I keep all practice notes that we do now too. And so sometimes I'll look back at that first practice and I just, more than anything, I remember the feeling when I got done with practice of having an overwhelming sense of this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, this is where I want to be. This is how I want to live my life. I want to be on the court with young people, teaching the game. And I was just so excited. I don't remember if we got anything productive done in practice. Our team was not very good. We could barely do the 5-man weave, and I'm teaching jump stops. But I remember just feeling like this is the direction I wanted to go with my life. And it's still, I go back to that moment a lot, even to this day.
Was there something that was harder than you thought when you first took the job?
Yeah, I think, and everybody's level is different that they start out at. I mean, so the demographic of my high school is somewhat of a, lower socioeconomic high school. These kids that I were coaching, some of them were playing basketball for, their first or second year. And so, you have all these grand dreams of coming in and, drawing up and teaching them some great backdoor play. And it's like, hey, they just need to learn how to catch the ball, or these kids are coming from family lives that are difficult. And so before you even get to the floor, there's things off the floor that are more difficult than you realize. But, and those things really came to the forefront when I eventually took over as the head coach of how much you have to do off the floor. That's more difficult than people understand.
Yeah, absolutely. We can get into that in a second. Patrick, where was your head at when you were in school? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, similar to high school, I knew I wanted to keep playing after college. I mean, especially after I had a pretty good freshman year. And, I just felt like, okay, 3 more years, I'm going to continue to develop. And, I want to see how far I can continue to develop. And that would involve me playing past college. The one thing, though, I will admit is I was not very proactive as my senior year was coming to an end as far as pursuing it. I mean, I knew I wanted to do it really badly, but yeah, I was, I guess, a combination of determination and laziness, which is weird to say. But then I graduate, and reality kind of hits you in the face, and you kind of had that oh shit moment.
Yeah. Did you have an idea of the process? I mean, did you even have an idea of what it would have taken in order to make that dream a reality? Had you talked to people who had done it in the past? Did you have a contact, or was it kind of you just thought it was going to happen, and then once you were done, you're like, ooh, it's not just going to happen. I got to go out and pursue.
Yeah, unfortunately, the latter. Yeah, I had no idea what the process entailed. So kind of good and bad. I graduated, but I still needed to finish some of my classes to get my degree. So it bought me a little window to kind of all right, get my head right and really now actively pursue it if I want to do it. And so then that's when, another college coach who was in our league from Occidental, Brian Newhall, he had sent players and had coached over there. So I reached out to him, and then he started to inform me of the process and, the leagues that, a player of my caliber and my resume, so to speak, can get into. And from there, it was me just constantly emailing. I mean, I would send out hundreds of emails over the next 6 months as I kind of finished up my degree. And, all it took was one, and for me to jump at it. And I got that one club that said, okay, you can come out here. I mean, it wasn't a very high level for sure. And I mean, there really was no pay. They were going to put me with a host family. I'd have to coach a couple of youth teams, but it would get my foot in the door and get me over here than me sitting on my couch in California. So, I took it. So I obviously had to sit out the season after I graduated, just stayed in shape, kept working, stayed on these emails, and then, went over there and just, again, started the grind of, okay, now I know what the process is required to really get to the level I want to. And, from there it was just, constantly building.
What was that adjustment like, going and living in a foreign country and trying to adjust to all that on top of transitioning from being a college player to being a professional player?
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge adjustment. I mean, I went to college that was 30 minutes down the road from my house. So, I hadn't even really lived out of state, let alone out of a country. So, I mean, coming here, not really knowing the language. I mean, not knowing any of the language, not even, and knowing no one. So, I mean, in a way, it just kept me singularly focused on basketball. Just every day I was just trying to work out and, trying to get in the gym. I mean, I would say it took at least a month for me to really finally feel comfortable. It was just, kind of some lonely nights of just self-doubt. What am I doing here? Especially, I mean, the level wasn't very high. But I kind of always, like I said, just kept that singular focus, knew what I wanted to do. And, that was the only thing that kind of drove me. And when it was tough, or when, it was me questioning myself, I always just kind of fell back on I'm out here to achieve a goal, and I'm not going to just go home without giving it a shot. So that kind of, pushed me through, especially the culture shock.
Do you know where to hit the backboard for the highest percentage shots? Do you know when using the backboard is better than taking a direct shot? Be certain that you are taking the highest percentage shots by training with the Shoticle. The Shoticle mounts on your backboard to give you the location of the highest percentage shots. Train with the Shoticle and you will score more. Basketball is a data-driven game, so don't ignore the data and the facts. We worry about the data so you can focus on shooting. Visit Shoticle.com now and start scoring more. Do you remember a time when you felt, maybe this is a weird way to ask it, but do you remember a time when you felt like you had, I don't know, figured it out, that you felt like you had made it, that you were going to be able to make it a successful career, at least for a few years? Was there ever a point when you reached that, or were you never to that point where you felt completely comfortable that you had sort of proven yourself?
To be honest, not really. I mean, I think it was part of my motivation too, that kind of I never really was gonna felt like, you know, that'd be me relaxing. You know, maybe my last season when I kind of knew, like, you know, I got back into the second league of Germany here in the Pro A, and I had a good year, and I just knew, you know, for my future wise, like it was time for me to like move on and really start to pursue other things. So maybe then I was more could enjoy the process more and was more, I'm like, okay, I'm more satisfied. But up until that, no. I mean, I always kind of, put pressure on myself to always, you know, I always kind of made it the goal. Like I wanted to keep playing as long as I felt I could keep getting better. And so, you know, I never was really satisfied and content. And I mean, I was never obviously playing in the EuroLeague or like first leagues either. So, you know, that was also another thing to keep striving for, whether it was attainable or not, but it was enough to motivate me.
Absolutely. All right. So I have two questions that I always like to ask anybody who played overseas. The first one is kind of a more benign question, and the second one is the fun one. So the first question is, what was your favorite city that you played in the time you were there, and then why? What about the city did you really like?
Okay. Man, you know, the tough thing is in the leagues I played in, you know, we never were really staying long in the cities. The cities were nice. I mean, we played in Heidelberg in Germany, which is really nice, kind of up on along the river and in the mountain, not like at the base of a little mountain, a college city. It's really nice, but, you know, we would just drive there, play the game, and then drive back. But, you know, that's also very nice. You know, I was lucky enough too that where I played, you know, I'm right by Dusseldorf, Cologne. And so those are really two nice cities that, you know, we would play some teams from there, but also I got to, like, on my free time, you know, they're only 30 minutes, an hour away, that I got to as well explore and see. But from a playing perspective, we were never truly in a city to like experience it, or, you know, other than just driving by, it looks nice.
Gotcha. All right. So the second question is, and I know everybody has one, what's your craziest European basketball story? Because I know you have one. I don't know what it is, but everybody's got one.
Oh man. I mean, I'd have to think what's one that's appropriate to tell as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's a standard answer too.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. I mean, if I could, let's put it this way: if I could kind of generalize it, the craziest experiences always come with my American teammates that come over here, and when they experience a new country for the first time. And just, I mean, we had one guy who didn't know how to make spaghetti. He was cooking the spaghetti in the water, and then he just put the pasta sauce in the spaghetti with the water, and then was asking, how do you get the water out of it? Because it was his first time ever having to cook. So, I mean, some of the rookie Americans that came over here, and seeing them experience always provided real entertainment for myself, who had been experienced over a while, and then of course for the Germans and the local players.
That's hilarious. That's good stuff right there. That is good stuff. All right, so let's fast forward, and I want to make sure we give enough time to be able to talk Slappin Glass and kind of where you guys came up with the idea. Have you guys kind of stayed in touch over the course of time since you left school? And just give me the genesis of Slappin Glass, how you guys came together to put this thing, to put together the concept.
Yeah, you want me to
Go
take that
ahead,
one,
Dan.
Pat?
You're always much better with this.
Okay. Well, you know, so Pat and I are really, really close friends. I mean, we would stay in touch regardless. When Pat left for Germany, Pat would still come back, Christmas time and in the summers. And I think, and Pat would probably agree, of all of our friends that we played with in college, everybody, went into different careers afterwards, but Pat and I are basketball junkies. I mean, obviously he went and played for 12 years professionally and now coaching over there. And then I went into coaching and have stayed in it. And so anytime we would get together when he was back, I mean, we'd be the last two guys at dinner or over a couple of beers talking about basketball, talking about the European game. I'm always picking Pat's brain on what are they running over in Germany? What's the best stuff you've seen? And, we just can't get enough of it. And so, fast forward, 10 years after, Pat's getting closer to finishing playing, we've always kind of talked about, hey, should we put something together? Should we could put some stuff out there. I think we could do this or do that. And Pat, you might remember this, but last year I was on tour for music over in Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium for about a month, and Pat came to a couple of the shows that I had out in Germany, and we stayed up really late one night in Munich, kind of having a couple of Heffenweisens over there, and we started to kind of talk about the possibility of someday doing something like this together. And come 6-7 months later with the pandemic, and we both have a little bit more free time on our hands, we just decided to give it a shot. And we said, hey, here's our ideas. Here's kind of our model of what we think would work and what we think people might like. And so we just kind of started in on it, and with a focus on, about 60-70% European basketball, but then also the college game, which obviously I'm a big part of, and then the NBA game as well, and just started to kind of build from there. And that was Pat, we started talking in about April, then we didn't really start in on it probably till, early May, and then getting closer to late June and July is when we really started to go with it.
So what was the mission? I mean, when you guys were sitting around thinking, hey, we want to put this thing together, what did you hope to accomplish? Who are you hoping to reach? And what did you really want to do with this thing as you started putting it together?
Yeah, I think both me and Dan, when we started we realized basketball's exploded just all over the world. And so there's so many great coaches and tactics that, isn't always on TV. It's not in the NBA. It's not in, ACC, Pac-12. And, there's so many things that me and Dan have come across that interested us. And so it just started from a place of, we just want to kind of, we're already watching the film. We're already picking it up ourselves and talking about it. So we just kind of wanted to, I guess, share this conversation or share what interests us at the very core. Like, if Dan saw something he'd like or that I would like, that was enough. Like, okay, let's put it together and let's throw it out there. I think we felt there had to be other people having these same conversations, or, that also didn't have the access as far as the games in Europe that we do. And we just wanted to, share the game and just show stuff that interests us. And, we started to get a really positive response. And, that's kind of where it's always grown from.
Yeah, and to follow up what Pat said, I think, Pat and I will talk daily about, stuff with Slappin Glass and our content, where we're going, all those sorts of things. But then at the heart of it too, like we always come back to, we just enjoy talking about basketball and learning about the game and studying great coaches and players. And so to second what Pat was saying about our initial mission and goal, and things have changed obviously as we've grown over the last 3 months, but what it always comes back to is, let's find the best stuff that we can. Let's put out the highest quality content of stuff that we're interested in, that we want to learn about, and, find the people that also want to learn about that too.
So how immediate was the feedback when you guys started putting stuff out on social media and you started creating, and then obviously you get into the podcast and you have some great guests that come on, and what's the response from people? What are you hearing from the initial group of, I'm assuming mostly coaches are the people that are finding you? What kind of feedback were you getting out of the gate?
Pat, you want to take it?
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, I'll take it. Yeah. The feedback has been great. That's been a sort of a guiding light for us. We feel like we're hearing the right type of feedback from the right type of people. Like we talk about our target demographic and the people we're trying to reach, and those people have been really positive. I mean, like anything, when you start it from scratch, like we did with this, back in basically May, it takes a little bit to get it off the ground. But I remember there was a tweet that we put out in late June, Pat, that was on the Yeshiva University motion offense.
Yeah.
And that kind of set us off in a direction that we weren't, we hadn't gotten to yet. It got tons and tons of retweets, and all of a sudden all these new followers started, coming to us, blah, blah, blah. And it was around that time that we said, okay, here's something that works. Here's where people are interested in. And then you could kind of see the wheels starting to turn, and the feedback from coaches has always been positive. And I think that's helped us a lot to kind of know, okay, what we're putting out is valuable to them that they can take back to their teams.
So how was that tweet different from what you guys were doing prior to that? What shifted it, or how was that particular clip or that particular thing that you put out, how was that different than what you kind of had in mind before?
Well, I think the difference was I don't know if there was necessarily anything hugely different as far as how we put the clip together. It just took off, like the crazy world of Twitter.
It was just the idea of what it was, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the thing that we put out was Yeshiva University was one of the best teams in Division III basketball last year and will be this year as well. And they run an offense that's a purely 5-out motion offense where they set 0 on-ball screens, and they're just fantastic. They're really fun to watch. So the clip was just basically showing, a minute and a half worth of their cuts and their back doors and all this. And I think, coaches, you see that and it caught on, and then, that community started to share it. And so that's what helped.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, like Dan said, the clip itself wasn't anything different, but obviously the response was vastly different, and it kind of then sent us down the rabbit hole of like, okay, well, let's kind of stick with this and let's go further into their yeshiva offense and breaking it down. And as we kind of kept looking at film, then that's when we reached out to their coach and said, hey, we'd love to talk to you too. So I think that clip kind of was like the first domino that led us to like, okay, let's kind of explore further and kind of see what we can pursue with this, and it led to our evolution.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's interesting when you guys obviously know it, and I know it too from what we've been able to do, and you put stuff out there, and some things are a hit, some things that you think are going to be really great end up not maybe necessarily getting as much attention as you thought they were going to. And so it's kind of a learning process, as you said, of going through and say, hey, let's try this. And then if you find something that works, you kind of go into it a little bit deeper and try to keep digging and keep making it work. So it sounds like from that, you guys said, okay, here's something interesting. Here's a set we found that's interesting. Here's a defensive coverage that we found that's interesting. And then when those things hit, maybe you guys take a deeper dive. Is that kind of the process that you're at now? Or just explain your process of how do you sort of curate the things that you're putting out there all the time? Where do you go to find that stuff? And then how do you determine what it is that you're going to put out for people to consume?
Go ahead, Pat. You can take that one first.
I mean, definitely now as we've obviously been able to have podcasts and have a little bit more dialogue with coaches, that obviously kind of will lead us down some different directions, or, to see this coach, like if, we had Coach Mike Taylor on of the Polish team, and he was talking about Will Voigt and his peel switching. So that kind of then leads us down, okay, well, what's this peel switching, And so, that obviously has been one way we've kind of pursued, other topics, so to speak. But also me and Dan continue to watch film, and we've gotten better with more reps. And so now we're really like the Zalgiris, we like the new coach there and what they're running. So let's kind of watch their preseason and kind of let's do a whole breakdown of what they're doing, and the same thing with Fenerbahce. So, as we just continue to watch film and stuff that catches our eye, I think we have a better eye now too for watching film and then, we're still pursuing stuff that we like, but as well as stuff that we've kind of learned from others or come across in conversations with other coaches.
Yeah, and I think.
So
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you're good. You follow up, because I was going to kind of take it another direction. So you follow up with Patrick's point, and then I'll jump in.
Well, yeah, and what Pat was saying too. As we've grown from May till now, I mean, we have a lot more data on what people like, or what works, what doesn't work, or the feedback. So we've got a newsletter now, a podcast now, obviously the daily Twitter stuff and the deeper dive YouTube stuff, and so we've been very we've really done a lot of thinking on everything we put out. Like we don't ever want to just put out something just to try to get some Twitter clicks. Like we really spend time, one tweet that we put out, might take an hour or two for us to put together the clip. Like we want it to be always very valuable information that we pass on to coaches. And like Pat said too, the podcast has been great because it opens up another form of dialogue. Like, Mike, it's such a great avenue.
It's amazing just how the personal connection that I think people feel when they tune in and they hear you. It's kind of a strange thing, because I always say that, before we started ours, I listened a lot to the Hardwood Hustle when Alan Stein was on there with Adam Bradley, and then now TJ Rosine's on there with Adam. But I would listen to it with my son in the car on our way to like AAU games, and then Alan I got connected to him through just a series of events, and he ended up being the first guest on our show, and I felt like I knew him because I had listened to 150 episodes of him talking about his kids and him talking about the various things that he did. And then I got to sit in front of him and talk to him, and I'm like, I feel like I know this guy, and yet I had never met him before. And I think it's a really intimate platform, because you're opening yourself up for, again, however long the episode is, an hour, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, whatever, and people really get kind of a window into who you are and to get to know you, and then they feel like they have that personal connection. And I think it's a really great way, it's a great medium to be able to build a following and kind of go deeper on some of the things that you guys are sharing, for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, it's part, we kind of, we talk about like kind of content buckets, or like, our kind of growth strategy of putting content out, and the podcast is a very big portion of it. But the podcast is great because, like you mentioned, it leads us down paths that we might have not thought about. And like Pat said, some guest will mention some concept, and then all of a sudden we're spending 4 or 5 hours looking it up to learn more about it. So it's been great for us too.
So what are some things just that you guys are seeing, maybe some trends that when you guys are watching film? I know you already mentioned the 5 out, no screens. What are some other things that you guys are seeing that coaches who are listening might want to take a peek at, some new concepts, some things that they could possibly add to their systems?
I'll start, Dan. Yep. For me, I mean, I'm really enamored with the next defense that you'll see clubs like Obradoro and Valencia run. I mean, obviously the pick and rolls become such a huge part of the game. So, finding ways to disturb the offense and give them new looks. And this next defense, I mean, I can't honestly watch enough of it at this moment. But then on the other side of the ball, as defenses are running this next defense and helping with the strong side defender, the offenses are continuing to adjust, and especially the off-ball movement around the pick and roll is something that I think clubs in Europe are really doing well with, whether 45 cuts, baseline cuts, or now we're seeing, setting flare screens from the baseline and drifting into the corners, So this is what really enjoys me every time I'm looking for, how teams are defending, but also then how the offenses are continuing to evolve and, counter the defensive moves. But yeah, so the off-ball movement in Europe, and obviously too, like the false motion, false action, again, to disrupt the defense and, take them out of their base coverage and disrupt the 3-man shell behind the pick and roll is stuff that I'm always kind of keeping an eye out, and that I think is so fascinating in the game today.
Yeah. And
Dylan, anything that jumps out at you?
Well, yeah, Pat just mentioned so many great things. So I would second all of those things. I think that especially the European game, they do such a great job of creating space in creative ways for their best players to make plays. And so whether it's 45 cuts, or like Pat mentioned, backside flares, or all this false motion, it's just so hard to guard. So it's fun to watch. And so those are things that really interest me on the offensive side. Defensively, I think that defenses are getting more and more sophisticated, and you see it in Europe. Pat mentioned the next defense, but then things like on a post catch, defenses are jumping into a 2-3 zone. That's super interesting. We're looking into that more right now. Just all these like hybrids of junk defenses as well at the NBA level is now trickling down to where instead of it just being straight man-to-man all the time or straight zone, it's these combos that teams are doing that I think is really inventive and is sort of a response to how much the pick and roll game has grown. And so teams are figuring out how to combat that. So that's super interesting to me. And then I always joke about this with Pat, but one of my favorite actions for offenses is the dribble handoff. And I'm working on what will eventually be a very long video edit on all the different dribble handoff actions, because I just think it's such a great action to help set up your offense. And so someday I'll release that.
It'll be his masterpiece.
Yeah, it's my. It'll be.
It's your manifesto.
Exactly. Yes.
It'll go on his tombstone.
That's right.
Hey, I like it. It is amazing to me when you look at the evolution of the game and how much it has changed over the last 30 years, clearly, but even in the last 5 years, just how it's accelerated, as you guys have said, like with the screen and roll, which, you look back in time and teams did it, but certainly not to the level where on every possession it becomes critically important to most of the offenses that you see at every level at this point. And then you talk it and flip it to the other side, and now the defense has to figure out how do we counter that, and it's just a constant evolution of the game. And when you see, and I think you guys make a great point with what you're doing is, a lot of us, especially here in the United States, clearly, you're watching the Power 5 conferences if you're watching college basketball, or you're watching the NBA, and yet there's so many innovative coaches all over the world and at every level that the fact that you guys are able to highlight some of those guys and some of those coaches that are doing unique and innovative things, to me, that's something that's very, very interesting, because a lot of people aren't willing to kind of go down and dive that deep into some of the things that you guys are. And I think that's just providing a lot of value to coaches who, I'm sure, again, you're hearing from them that, hey, it's great that you're highlighting some of these coaches that are doing these unique things in places that most of us wouldn't ordinarily find them.
Thank you. Yeah,
I appreciate it. That's 100%. That's what we're trying. That's our goal.
All right, so I am coming up against my time limit, so I want to give you guys a chance to talk a little bit about where you see Slappin Glass going. What is it going to look like a year from now? And obviously, I know you can't tell the future, but just kind of what are you guys thinking based on what you've accomplished to this point, and then looking forward, what do you see being sort of the next goal or the evolution of Slappin Glass?
Pat, you want me to
Go
take
ahead,
it?
Dan.
Okay. Well, first of all, before as we run up on time here, Mike, I want to say thanks so much for having us on.
Absolutely.
I also want to say thanks because when I was Googling to prepare for the Hoop Heads stuff, I also accidentally wrote in Hop Heads, and that brought me to an IPA beer drinking club, which I looked into. So I appreciate you leading me down that rabbit hole this morning.
We're doing double duty. We're not only having a basketball podcast, but we're doing some beer advertising on the side.
So big thanks for that.
I'm looking for sponsors. So you
guys should get together. I think you could.
That's it. I like it.
But as far as the vision and the future of Slappin Glass, I mean, Pat and I talk daily about kind of our 1 month goals and our end of the year goals and where we are a year from now. I think that it starts with continuing to add value to coaches in the way that kind of we want to, and the podcast is a way that we'll continue to grow it through great conversations with coaches, and I think as we continue to build out our YouTube, Twitter, and our newsletter, just ways that we can connect with coaches. I think we've made a distinction early on that we didn't want to just be two guys putting out videos and asking for money from people from videos. We wanted to do something that was more valuable and creating valuable content that had a community around it. And so we've always tried to have that community feel with what we do, and to share, and to make that where coaches come back because they know we're going to provide valuable material, but it's not just a one-off transaction of here's a video, good luck. It's more of a continuing dialogue. And so that's what we're hoping to continue to build through all those different platforms.
Awesome. So before we get out, I want to give you guys a chance to share where people can find you. Give us all the social media channels, all the places that people can figure out and find out what you're doing, and then I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
So for Twitter, you can find us at Slappin Glass, so no G in the Slappin. So Slappin Glass. You can also find us on YouTube, and then our newsletter comes out Sunday mornings, and you can find that slappinglass.substack.com, and that comes out every Sunday.
All right, last question, the name. How'd you guys come up with it?
I think it was Dan. You were just looking for available names that were free.
Yep.
And it wasn't. And you came across it was Slappin
Backboard.
Backboard, right?
Yeah. So if you listen to our podcast, it opens up with the two of us talking, and that's an actual clip of us coming up with the name. Where I mentioned to Pat, "Hey, what about like Slappin Backboard is available?" And Pat just said Slappin Glass, and I just started laughing. We both started laughing. We thought, "This is it. We're going with Slappin Glass."
Yeah, it made too much sense coming from two 6-foot white boys who could never dunk. So slapping the glass after layups was kind of the highlight of our high school and college careers.
Well, I say that to people all the time. When I've relayed this story numerous times, but when I was in elementary school and I used to go to my local high school's games, the one thing that I always dreamed about, because I would watch the players do it, is coming out for warm-ups and slapping the glass.
Yep.
Yeah.
During the layup lines. I'm like, oh, someday I want to run out to the pep band and hear the music and be able to slap the glass on a backboard. And so I was able to do that. I was never able to throw down any dunks, but I was able to get out and slap the glass. So I'm right there with you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Dan and Pat, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you guys on. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us from your various locations around the world. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
If you have an existing podcast or are looking to launch your own pod but aren't sure where to start, the team at My Podcast Manager can help. Our podcast team works behind the scenes so you can do what you do best. We'll help you launch your podcast, make it sound great, and free up your time for the more enjoyable parts of podcasting. If you're ready to put your podcast editing, production, and promotion on autopilot with a trusted team of podcasting professionals, visit mypodcastmanager.com to get started.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads Podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.